Okay, so I'm gonna create a series of videos just on basic rigging of a character. You can see I've got my third character here. We've already kind of taken a look at the spaceman character and the gnome. So I have not rigged her yet, and her model is most of the way done. There's still a few little tweaks that I want to make, but I think most of those tweaks are going to be on the texture side. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I know that her major proportions are not going to change, so I'm going to go ahead and create my bone structure around her for this one. So I just wanted to create these. I'm going to try to split them up and keep them relatively short. Some of these, I think this one in particular, might be a little bit longer, just because there's a lot to cover here. But I'm going to try to get through making the bones as quickly as possible. We're going to do the bones in one, and then I'm going to do all my control elements in another video. So hopefully I will cover everything that you guys are wondering about in these. If nothing else, this should be a quick reference that you guys have to figure out how to build your own bone structure if you say you missed it in class or you fell a little bit behind in class and needed to catch up. So for this one, I'm building the same structure that we built in class, but I'm going to use a slightly different naming convention. I think there was a little bit of confusion doing the BN and then having BN end and things like that. It just sounded confusing. And also using the word bone, I think people were confusing the connecting area between the joints as the bone, which I guess you could say that it is. But in Maya, bone and joint, at least when I'm saying it, is essentially synonymous. But I'm going to use joint for this. Okay, so that being said, you can see in my scene, it's pretty clean right now. We have one layer, I think that's empty. I think that's a remnant of my modeling file, because I pulled this from my modeling file. So I'm going to delete that layer. First thing I'm going to do is drag over. So I select, I don't want to actually select the group. I want to select all the objects in it and add that to a new layer. This is going to be my mesh layer. And I'm doing this so I can toggle visibility, but also so I can make it a reference in the scene so I can't click on it. And that way I won't accidentally be dragging and clicking on these elements while I'm laying down my joints. I'm going to also name her Snow Girl. That is the name that the original artist gave her. And then lastly, you see that I have already frozen her transformations and centered her pivot down at the centered the pivot and then moved it down to the bottom of the feet and made sure she was snapped right to the floor plane. And let's see, she's facing down the z-axis, which is exactly what I want. So let's get started. First thing that I want to do is go into my orthographic side view and hit F to frame. And the reason I'm doing this is because whenever you draw out joints, just like when you're drawing out CVs, if you do it in perspective, Maya doesn't really know how far you want it to go, so sometimes you end up with like a joint that is like 10,000 out here in space or something like that. But if you do everything from one of the perspective views, it will always put it on the axis that you're facing. So in this case, we have our YZ plane here, and all of the joints will be placed along that. So when we go to front view, everything that we place from side will be right down this center line. And then we just move it into place. It's not too big of a deal. Looks like I made a bottom camera there. Alright, so first thing we want to do is grab our Create Joint tool, which we can do through Skeleton Create Joints, or we can click this icon right here. I'm going to do it through Skeleton first, and go to my options box, and just hit Reset, make sure everything is at standard. The only thing that we'd probably want to change here would be the joint size, or scale, which we don't actually even... we don't even have to worry about that right now, because we don't know the size of our scene. So we're just going to place the joints and see how big they are, and then we can decide on a size for them. So I'm hitting 4 just to be able to see through. And first one I'm going to do is the hip down to the ankle. So let's see. So she's going to maybe be a little bit more challenging because we don't have the full body underneath of her, and she also has kind of cartoony proportions. They're not super realistic. So I think let's just estimate. It's kind of up to us how we want the character to move. So I'm going to move her hip right around, right around here. And then let's place the knee. And you can see that I'm moving forward a little bit. The reason that I'm doing this, as some of you are probably aware now, when we create our IK handle between these, we need to have a little bit of a bend so Maya knows which way to sort of direct that animation. And if there's no bend, sometimes that whole structure can kind of break down and the joints can go all over the place. So I'm adding a little bit of a bend into it now, and then just clicking one more time for the ankle. I'm going to hit enter. So first thing, I'm just hitting shift. If you hold shift when you click on this, it will actually open up the entire chain, whereas if I were just to click it without shift, you see you have to open it one at a time. So we're starting with the top of our chain. This time we're going to do J, L, hip, J for joint, J, L, knee, and then for end, we're still going to do end at the end. So for this one, we have J, L, ankle, end. So it'll be easy to identify. So next thing we want to do is create the foot, and we actually want to do a parenting system between our ankle, where our foot starts, and our leg ends. So I'm just going to use the create joint tool again, and I think this part threw a few people off. Basically what I'm doing is I don't, even though I want it to snap right underneath of this bone, if I click here right now, it's just going to select this bone and it's going to continue the chain out, and you would see it getting parented all the way along here. But the thing is, I want a duplicate here. I want an ankle that's going to start my foot system. So all I'm doing is clicking down and holding click down somewhere off of that bone, just so it creates a new chain. And I'm going to drag it right around here, and we can adjust that later. Then I'm looking for basically where I want the foot to pivot from when it rolls, which is going to be right around here. And then just draw one more out for the end of the foot. This just sort of gives us a visual axis for how we want things to rotate. So let's see. Let's name this now. J, L, ankle. We're just going to put nothing there. We know that because it doesn't say end, that it must be part of the actual chain. J, L, foot. And J, L, toe, end. Alright, and we can see now if we go to our perspective that we have drawn this right down the center axis like we expected. I can see it even better if you go to the front view. And I'm actually going to change just my visibility to just the T. I can't remember what T stands for, but it's a grayscale. It makes things easier to see, for me anyway. Alright, so next thing that we want to do is connect these. But before I do that, I'm actually going to change the joint radius on the ankle to 0.25. So it's really, there's an obvious difference between the two. Because I know that later on I'm going to be drawing an IK handle down, and I want to connect the IK handle to this bone. So if that bone's bigger, it's going to be easier to select right in here. So anyway, I want to select my J ankle, and I want to control select the end. You could also just shift select it in the main screen and just hit P. And to test it, let's just rotate from here, and the whole chain is moving, so that is just what we want. So before I go any further, I'm just going to save this scene as version 2. I'm reserving version 1 for basically completely fresh start. So if anything goes wrong, I can always go back to version 1, and I know that there's no joints or anything that I have to clear out of that. So with that saved, let's put it into place. So we're going to go to our front view. We'll select the top of the chain, which is the hip, and we're just going to move that out. And you'll notice the orientation. So this character model is a little bit different because her legs mostly go straight down, which is different from the other models that I rigged so far. But her feet are sort of facing out a little bit, so there's a little bit of a relaxed element to that. So I want to make sure that the pivots of all of these joints are really angled properly. So since she's slightly turned out, you'll notice if it's forward, this is going to rotate up, but I'm actually going to want to rotate it out a little tiny bit. But the thing is, I don't want to rotate my joints at all. And the reason for that is, pre-binding, you want all of your joints to be set to 0, 0, 0 in the rotation axis. So instead, I'm going to rotate the pivot of the joint by hitting Control-A to access my attribute editor. And I'm just going to look down here, so I have my joint orientation, and I have X, Y, and Z, and I think I'm going to want to rotate a little bit in X and a little bit in Z. So let's just take a look. I'm going to hold Control down and click and drag. You see when I do that, it's rotating the pivot of it, but it's not changing the actual transform rotate up here. So let's just go out a little bit, and then I want to take Z to just rotate it just a teeny bit out this way. So you'll notice that this is actually changing a little bit, and that's what I wanted to see happen. However, if I go back here, you'll see the rotation's still set to 0. So I'm going to hit save again. And before I go any further now, I'm going to create a second display layer for my joint system. I only have a few joints so far, but let's add them. Clicking this button adds selected objects to a new layer. And let's just call this joints. And we'll just click save. And now I can toggle visibility on this on and off. So next step, we're going to create the pelvis. And then after that, we're going to create the back all the way up through the head. So first thing we want to do, and the pelvis, this is another one that I think a few people got backwards, and this is really easy to get backwards, and honestly, I've gotten it backwards a few times, probably recently. It doesn't take long to fix it, though. But you just got to remember this order. So I will do my best to not get it backwards this time. So first thing we want to do is just draw a 2-joint chain for the pelvis. And so I'm going to put the pelvis right around here. And this is also going to be where my root joint that the back follows starts at. But for now, I'm just going to make it the pelvis, and then one more just to sort of end that pelvis and hit enter. So you should just have these 2 joints here. And let's turn the mesh off for a little bit so we can see this. I think I might actually change the background color of my scene. It's a little bit hard to see stuff right now. I always forget exactly where this is. I think it's General Editors, Color? No. Is it Display? Man, usually I find this right away. Maybe it got moved, or maybe I'm just blind right now. Okay, well, I'm going to leave it alone for now. And if I can find it later, I will find it, but I'm not too worried about it. Man, I'm surprised that I'm having this much trouble finding it. Anyway, alright, well, let's just move forward. So, last thing I want to do is parent this. I want this to be the parent, so I'm going to select that first and select this and hit P. Oh, no, I'm sorry, backwards. So select the hip first, then this, and hit P. And that makes the, yeah, you want basically everything pointing out from this joint, from the pelvis. So we're going to call this pelvis, or J pelvis. And this one is going to be J pelvis end. All right, so now that is done. So now we have, you know, the basics for the body here. And I think actually before I do the back, let's just finish this section. So now I'm going to create an IK handle. And I talked about this a little bit in class, but standard deformations like this is called FK. This is forward kinematics. So as I rotate forward, it moves forward. IK is inverse kinematics, where it's not necessarily that things are rotating backwards, but it's sort of giving you an extra level of control and animating more than one thing. It's not just this like directly forward thing. It's kind of a little more complicated than that. But it actually makes our animation a whole lot easier to do. So I'm going to go up to Skeleton, Create IK Handle. And the most important part here is that we change our current solver to Rotate Plane. And you'll see why later. But it essentially comes down to that we want to create a pole vector, and we want to make sure that we have the ability to adjust the direction that this IK is moving. So to create this, all we're going to do is draw 2 points, the start and end point. So we want to start with our start point, which is the hip. And you see it highlights everything. And then now we can zoom in down here, and we know that the one that we want to connect to is the big one. So I'm going to select out here on the big one. And that draws our IK handle here, as we can see. And we have this nice rotation plane here. And we can see if I move the IK now, we get animation of the whole bone structure and the knee with just one selection. So let's name this one IK RP for rotate plane, L leg. Hit save. So now that we have this, obviously we need something on the other side. So let's turn our mesh on just to make sure that this works out right. So if I modeled this correctly, then doing a quick mirror of this should make everything line up perfectly. So I'm going to select the J hip, and let's go up to Skeleton, Mirror Joints. Alright, and we're looking at the options for this. So I think by default, let's reset it and see. So by default, this is going to be blank, and X, Y, and behavior are both selected. So we want to keep behavior, but we want to actually mirror across the Y, Z axis. Basically, you can go by whatever, if you're looking forward and you wanted to mirror it to the left, which of these is here? It's the X axis, and X does not exist in Y, Z, so that's the one that we want. Also, if I go into perspective, I can kind of show you Y, Z would basically be, you know, this is the up and down is the Y plane, and Z is the front and back plane here. So you can imagine we want to mirror across that plane. And then last thing, we've been putting this underscore L underscore in here. So we're going to tell it to search for that in the naming convention, and we're going to replace that with R because we're mirroring to our right side. So let's click mirror, and there we go. Looks like we are all set. Let's just try. So the one thing that it didn't get was the IK handle. Let's see. It did not get the L for anything. Did I type that in wrong? All right, let's redo that. Oh, did I have a space? Oh, I had a space. That was the problem. Okay. This should work. There we go. So, usually when things go wrong like that, just check again. You probably typed one thing wrong or didn't select one thing just right. Alright. So let's check now. If we select our pelvis and do some rotation. Okay, that's alright. Yes, that's pretty good. Alright. So next thing that we want to do is to draw our backbone up the whole chain all the way up through the head. So let's take a look at the side view here. And again, we're going to want to do what we've been doing before, where we draw our joint somewhere out in space and then move it over top of our joint. And this is going to be our root. This is going to be the joint that we select to select the entire chain. So let's do one for the back, somewhere around here, one for the chest. This one's going to be the one that actually connects to the arms, and then one for the base of the neck. And then let's just draw out the head too while we're here. So head is going to be here, and head end is going to be up here. I'm holding shift just to snap that. And while I'm on this side view, I might as well just finish the head. So this time I'm actually going to click right on this joint because I want to start drawing from that joint. And this is just going to go right here. We're going to draw that out for our jaw. Now, this character, we're probably not going to actually see that, but, you know, you never know. Doesn't hurt to put it in there. So one thing is that I think I want to move this joint back. So if I do this, you'll see I'm going to have to counter move everything else, which isn't too big of a deal. But I could also just hold D down to move the pivot, and that will actually slide this back in space a little bit without messing everything else up. So I'm just going to do that just a tiny bit. And let's just do that here too. Okay. Alright, so let's call this one J root. It's going to be our center of everything. We have J, and we're not doing L here obviously because we're going right up the center. So J back, J chest, shift here, J neck, J head, J head end. This is J jaw and J jaw end. Hit and save real quick on that. And let's just take a look here and let's make sure that this is centered perfectly on our pelvis. So I'm going to hold V and just snap it. So you see it snapped up a little bit. Let's just make sure the rest of the chain looks okay. I think it only went up a couple pixels, so it should be fine. I am seeing an issue with the pivot on this one. I think it's okay, actually. All right. So last thing we want to do is select our pelvis, and then control select our root, parent that. So we want it that when we select our root, everything moves. And when we select our pelvis, not everything moves, just the pelvis. So that, again, is why we do our duplicate here. So for this one, let's make pelvis a little bit smaller. Make that 0.25. And we should be good. Hitting Control Save. All right. Let's see. Next thing we have now is the arms. And I think I'm going to save that for the next video. So right now we have a pretty good setup. Yeah, I think it'll be helpful to sort of break this up. So we have our, basically the center of our body here. And you can see the shape is a little bit different because of this character. It's kind of neat, too. It's kind of fun that you can just look at the skeleton and kind of immediately start getting a feel for what this character looks like just based off of it. So I'm hitting save, and I'm going to continue the arms and everything else and the rest of the bones in the next video.